High on a frozen, wind-scoured slope deep within the Ural Mountains, a search party in early 1959 stumbled upon a scene that utterly defied logical explanation. Half buried in the snow was a heavy canvas tent, inexplicably slashed open from the inside, its contents abandoned in what appeared to be a moment of absolute terror. The 9 experienced hikers who had pitched that tent were nowhere to be found, leaving behind their boots, their heavy winter gear, and a mystery that would endure for over 6 decades. The unexplained deaths of those 9 individuals would cement this event as one of the most baffling yet rigorously documented anomalies of the 20th century. Scattered across the desolate landscape, the bodies presented a terrifying and paradoxical array of injuries that baffled forensic experts. While some victims appeared to have succumbed to the freezing temperatures, others exhibited catastrophic physical trauma that simply could not be explained by a typical wilderness accident. The verifiable evidence left behind forms the absolute core of what became known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. Meticulous forensic reports, recovered diaries, and rolls of film developed from the hikers' own cameras provide a chillingly transparent window into their final days. These authenticated documents paint a picture of a sudden, catastrophic event that struck a highly competent group of explorers, plunging them into a desperate, unwinnable fight for survival against an unknown adversary. The ruined tent itself offered the first critical, undeniable clue to investigators. Careful analysis of the canvas confirmed that the structural damage was not caused by external forces like wind or animal attacks, but by blades cutting outward from within. This verifiable fact suggested a panicked, immediate evacuation into sub-zero temperatures, an action that seasoned outdoorsmen would only take if remaining inside the shelter meant certain death. The timeline of that fateful expedition in February 1959 reveals a group meticulously prepared for harsh conditions. Led by 23-year-old engineering student Igor Dyatlov, the team had established their final camp on the slopes of Kholat Shukhl, a remote peak whose name translates to Dead Mountain in the indigenous Mansi language. Their recovered journals show a group in high spirits, carefully documenting their route and weather conditions right up until the sudden silence of their final night. What singular event drove these resilient individuals to abandon their only source of warmth remains the central historical enigma. They were not novices prone to irrational panic or poor judgment, making their sudden flight all the more perplexing to the Soviet authorities tasked with untangling the disaster. The meticulous nature of their expedition planning stood in stark, unexplainable contrast to the chaotic, deadly reality of their final hours. The condition of the recovered bodies only served to deepen the investigative nightmare. The first 2 victims, discovered nearly a mile away beneath a large cedar tree, were found beside the remains of a small, desperate fire. They had died of hypothermia, but their hands were stripped of bark and tissue, suggesting a frantic, agonizing attempt to climb the tree, perhaps to seek a vantage point or escape an unseen threat. 3 more bodies were located on the slope between the cedar tree and the ruined tent, frozen in dynamic postures that indicated they were desperately trying to crawl back to their camp. However, it was the final 4 victims, discovered 3 months later, buried deep under the melting snow in a rocky ravine, who exhibited the most severe, horrifying, and scientifically inexplicable trauma of the entire group. Forensic autopsies of these ravine victims revealed crushed ribs and fractured skulls, injuries of such immense magnitude that the lead medical examiner likened them to the sheer force of a high-speed car crash. Yet, in a profound deviation from standard trauma pathology, there was a distinct lack of external soft tissue damage or bruising associated with such tremendous impact. The sheer physics of their internal injuries seemed completely incompatible with their surroundings. Adding a layer of profound psychological strangeness to the physical trauma was the verified phenomenon of paradoxical undressing. Several victims were found partially clothed or wearing items forcibly removed from their deceased companions. This is a recognized, albeit bizarre, behavioral response to terminal hypothermia, where the freezing brain severely misinterprets the rapidly dropping body temperature as an intense, burning heat, prompting victims to shed their protective layers. Even more perplexing to the scientific community were the anomalous radiation traces detected during the later stages of the investigation. Laboratory analysis confirmed the presence of elevated levels of beta radiation on several specific articles of the hikers' clothing. The verifiable presence of radioactive contamination in a remote, pristine mountain pass baffled investigators, introducing a highly anomalous variable that defied any conventional wilderness survival explanation and sparked immediate whispers of state secrets. The official Soviet investigation, overwhelmed by the contradictory evidence and the bizarre state of the remains, ultimately concluded that the group died from a compelling natural force. This vague, classified verdict effectively closed the criminal case and sealed the archives for decades, but it left a massive void of understanding. It was an admission of profound defeat by the scientific and investigative apparatus of the time, inviting a multitude of competing theories to fill the silence. For decades, the most grounded scientific hypothesis centered on the sheer destructive power of a slab avalanche. Proponents of this theory argued that a sudden, localized block of compacted snow could have struck the tent in the darkness, causing the severe internal injuries observed in some victims, and prompting the desperate, underdressed evacuation of the survivors into the freezing night. However, this avalanche theory faced significant verifiable counter-evidence that kept the mystery alive. The slope angle of the campsite was relatively shallow, no massive debris field was immediately apparent to the first search party, and crucially, the hikers' footprints leading away from the tent remained clearly visible, somehow undisturbed by the massive snow displacement that a traditional avalanche would dictate. Modern computer modeling has continuously attempted to bridge this gap, notably through a rigorous 2021 study published in the journal Communications, Earth and Environment. Researchers utilized advanced fluid dynamics to demonstrate how a specific delayed slab avalanche triggered by a localized katabatic wind could hypothetically cause the exact blunt force trauma observed without leaving the typical massive environmental footprint of a standard snowslide. Yet the elegant mathematical certainty of the avalanche model does not fully account for all the lingering anomalies. The anomalous radioactive contamination on the clothing and the highly specific, localized nature of the internal trauma continue to challenge a purely meteorological explanation. The puzzle stubbornly resists being neatly packaged into a single, straightforward natural disaster. Another compelling scientific theory points to the invisible threat of infrasound. This phenomenon occurs when specific high-velocity wind patterns interact with the unique topography of the Ural Mountains, creating low-frequency sound waves that fall below the threshold of human hearing. These unheard, powerful vibrations have been scientifically proven to induce severe panic, dread, and profound physiological distress in humans, potentially explaining the sudden, irrational flight from the safety of the tent. Given the geopolitical climate of 1959, military involvement has also been heavily and critically scrutinized. Theories involving classified weapons testing, airborne parachute mines, or toxic rocket fuel anomalies offer a potential, albeit unverified, explanation for both the blunt force trauma and the strange radiation traces. The remote wilderness was indeed a known theater for Soviet military experimentation during the height of the Cold War. Declassified historical documents have confirmed that military testing did occur in the broader geographic region during that era. However, despite decades of intense historical inquiry, no definitive, verifiable link has ever been established between specific military operations and the precise location of the hikers' demise on that exact February night. The military hypothesis remains a compelling correlation without undeniable causation. When examining the final photographs, investigators must constantly battle the phenomenon of pareidolia, the human psychological tendency to perceive meaningful shapes or faces in entirely random data. Smudges on the surviving film negatives and odd lighting artifacts have birthed countless unproven theories of unknown entities or glowing orbs, reminding us that we must strictly separate verified photographic anomalies from optical illusions and human imagination. The enduring puzzle of the 9 hikers forces us to confront the absolute limits of forensic science when applied to extreme, unforgiving environments. The isolated, frozen landscape meticulously preserved the physical evidence of the tragedy, but it simultaneously obscured the sequence of events, creating a localized anomaly where standard investigative logic and timeline reconstruction completely break down. The compelling natural force cited by the original investigators acts as a chilling placeholder for human ignorance. It serves as a stark acknowledgement that the natural world possesses mechanisms of destruction and terror that we have yet to fully categorize, understand, or predict, especially in the brutal, high-altitude extremes of the deep winter. Beyond the forensic anomalies and scientific debates, the recovered diaries and final photographs serve as a poignant reminder of the human element at the heart of this enigma. They document a vibrant group of young explorers pushing the absolute boundaries of their endurance, capturing moments of joy and camaraderie, completely unaware of the sudden catastrophic event that was about to erase them from the mountain. The lessons from that initial investigation never faded, continuing to heavily influence how modern search and rescue operations interpret bizarre behavioral evidence in extreme hypothermia cases. The tragedy at the pass fundamentally altered the protocols for wilderness survival analysis, ensuring that the bizarre physical evidence they left behind contributed to our broader understanding of human physiological collapse. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains a profound testament to the unpredictable and sometimes terrifying power of the natural world. It stands as a meticulously documented mystery where verifiable facts construct a narrative of enduring strangeness, challenging us to maintain our intellectual curiosity and to keep questioning the dark, unresolved shadows cast upon the snow.